There's a whole lot of mess going on right now with knee ascenders. I want to talk about that a little bit. Specifically, I want to talk about the SAKA and why you can't buy a SAKA right now. Starting months ago, I spent hours and hours reading through all of the posts on the forums. I watched as the SAKA progressed and came into the market. This is my take on what's going on, and I'm responsible for it. I'm not affiliated with either side of the argument, just giving my view.
Ow.
Really, we're talking about rope walking systems. Modern day, we call those knee ascenders because they sit somewhere near your knee. You're talking about a bungee cord hooked onto a rope grab that's hooked onto a tether that's hooked onto a foot strap. That's a knee ascender. Cool thing about that is with SRT climbing, that allows you to alternate your steps up the rope, and the two different rope grabs don't bang into each other. Let's briefly go back to the beginning and look at how these inventions came to be. If you really want to go back to the beginning, and I don't think you do, then you need to go back to how rope was created. Now, as we all know, the creation of rope is documented in the book of Genesis, chapter 51, where it says, "And on the 8th day God created rope. And he threw the rope over a branch, climbed up it, and said, 'This is good.'" Maybe that's too far back. Let's skip the rope part. Let's get up to the knee ascender part. 1934, a guy named Henry Bruno wanted to go exploring in caves. So he comes up with what he calls monkeys. These things that can grab the rope, something mechanical that can help him hold onto the rope and get up and down when he needs to. 1934, that's how old this story is. 1958, you've got two guys that are climbing the Swiss Alps. Their names are Juicy and Marty. And they create something called the Jumar. A name combination that bad hasn't been used again until Bradulina. Okay? But they called it the Jumar. And it was specifically for climbing the Alps. It was a mechanical device that was a rope grab. It worked. Fast forward another 10 years, 1968, a guy named Bruno Dressler decides he wants to go explore pit caves. You know, where you go vertical, right down into the ground? So he went to a friend of his called Fernand, who worked in a machine shop. And he said, "Hey, can you make me something like the Jumar, only I want to modify it a little bit so it works better for caving." The guy said, "Great, I'll make it for you, but you got to let me sell them if other people want them." Fernand's last name was Petzel. He lived in France, in a little town called Crolles. Petzel, Kroll, you get it. The Petzel company came from this guy specifically, making these devices for caving. Okay, so rope grabs have been around forever, but what about knee ascenders? What about specifically using a rope grab in a way that lets you use two different ascenders on both feet and be able to get up the rope? We start seeing references to this in the 80s. In the 80s was like this great documentation phase where people started going back through all the old caving technical manuals. They started going back through all the alpine climbers that were climbing the Alps and Everest and all these places. One of the biggest efforts to document all this information about rope climbing was done in 1987 in a book called On Rope, North American Vertical Rope Techniques. It was written by two guys named Smith and Paget. In that book, they described something called a rope walking system. You can use two ascenders and walk up the rope. And they had all kinds of descriptions of how this works. Essentially a knee ascender. A year later, you find all kinds of other manuals, like the Technical Manual for Cavers by Alan Warlid, called Vertical. In 1988, he described the Gibbs rope walking system, which Gibbs, by the 80s, was a manufacturer of rope grabs. It looked something like this. Simple, sweet, works excellent. This is a cheap Chinese knockoff of Gibbs because I'm pretty cheap. So 1988 they're writing this up as a rope walking system using a rope grab and a tether, and the pictures in his book looked like this. Pretty much a knee ascender as we know it today, just without it being put together for you. Jump ahead another 8 years from that. 1996, Jerry Baranek puts out his book, The Fundamentals of General Tree Work. Now we start crossing over into arboriculture, and we see that all these great ideas that came from caving and from mountain climbing and sailing, all this information that's been done with ropes for years started creeping into the tree service industry. So in Jerry's book, here's how he described this system. An ascender is fastened directly to one of your boots using straps or buckles. Another ascender is set on the line over that one and is tethered to the other foot by a line or strap about 20 inches long. A bungee cord is attached to the second ascender, and it is stretched out to fix to a top ascender, rigged the same way as the frog setup. The ascender on the tether is pulled up the line by the bungee cord as the top ascender is thrust upwards. What he's describing, what he's pictured here, is a knee ascender. That's what we call it today. Fast forward another 10 years from that. A guy named Michael Frankhauser goes through this old documentation and finds some fantastic stuff and says, hey, I can improve on this. And he does some really ingenious things that really converted it to a rope walking system that you could buy off the shelf. It looked like this. He called it the Haws and put it together into one system along with all the other stuff described. And he patented it. So the original patent that Michael made wasn't for knee ascenders. It was for a specific configuration of a knee ascender. And that included an elastic cord with one free end and one fixed end. The use of a boat clip to fasten the bungee cord. The tether is made out of a braided polyester rope. Okay, here's one of the kickers though. Part of that patent was that the bungee cord would pass through a hollow tube down to the foot, so it had a lot farther to stretch. That's what made it so you didn't have to have that top ascender on there to, way up above your head to make this thing work. Very cool innovation. Fast forward again, a little bit later. Richard Mumford starts toying with this idea and says, which is what Richard does, is how can I improve this? How can I make this better? How can I make it more efficient? And he put up a video online saying, hey, here's how you can make your own knee ascender that's even better than the Haws. People liked it. People wanted him to put it together for them and sell it to them. So he did. It included a bungee cord that was fixed at both ends with a loop in the middle. Instead of that polyester rope, it included a hard sewn tether with two tubes down the sides of it. Instead of a foot loop that was made out of the rope, he had a foot loop that was sewn. First time I saw these sewn foot loops come up in one of Richard's videos, I went out and sewed 2 or 3 of my own. I thought, okay, that's kind of brilliant. So you can put it on, it's stretchy, it stretches over your boot and it holds it on there. Because they were darn convenient, because you can leave it on your foot and climb in the tree, and anytime you need a loop on your boot, you got one. It's good. This is when it hit the fan. Lawsuits started going back and forth. There was a lot of hurt feelings. A new version of the Haws came out, the 2.0, which incorporated some of Richard's advances. So things get even more complicated now. Richard filed for his own patent. It's still patent pending for the advances that he put in. Both people were producing knee ascenders. They're both different than the other one. They both work really well. This is where Weaver comes into the picture. Michael, at some point, started working for Weaver, and they got control of that patent. So just recently, Weaver started putting pressure on Richard Mumford and saying, you can't sell the SAKA anymore. You can't sell any knee ascender that has any part to do with the patent, even though it's not quite how patents work. You can make changes to something that's patented and then sell it. You just can't sell the same thing, and it has to be a significant enough change, which is why Richard changed it and filed for a new patent. We're waiting to see how that patent application comes back. Okay, so at this point you might be asking, why the history lesson? Why am I going into all this stuff that happened 100 years ago? The point I want to make is there has been thousands of really creative minds that have gotten this industry, this whatever you want to call this tree climbing thing, to where it is today, with all these cool gadgets coming out and new techniques and new ways to do things. For this knee ascender piece that we're talking about today, when Michael Frankhauser came up with these ideas, they were brilliant. And they pushed us way forward. And if any of those thousands of minds that came before him had spoken up, if Jerry Baranek or anybody else had come on and said, actually no, I own knee ascending and rope walking, and you can't innovate in that area, I would have been furious. If I'd been there, I would have stood up for Michael and said, oh no, you can't do that. You don't own rope walking. You can't stop technology from happening just because you made advances to it or documented it or whatever before that point. Now, if you did work on this, like Michael did, you should get paid for it, and he should get paid for it. However, if I'm going to defend Michael like that, I got to do the same for Richard. And he made fantastic advances in building the SAKA. If I'm not going to let somebody from the past stop Michael from doing what he did and innovating for us and benefiting the community, we can't let Michael or anybody else stop Richard from also innovating and progressing and moving the community forward. So if you say I should get paid for what I did, absolutely. If you say I should get paid for what I did and you're not allowed to do anything beyond that point, okay, now we got an issue. So here's what I'm asking. Let the patent office do their job and play out, but don't stop anybody from innovating, because that's when people get angry. That's when Facebook blows up. That's when the angry midget appears. Hey Norman, what's up? My ideal, which is frankly I think impossible because of the cloud of litigation hanging over this whole process now, but my ideal would be is if everybody could sit down at the table and say, okay, there's certain parts of the SAKA that definitely were inspired by work that Michael did on the Haas. So we're going to pay a patent licensing fee for each SAKA sold. Work that out. I don't care if it's $1, $20, 50 cents, whatever, okay, for that contribution. And then conversely, there's things that have been incorporated into the Haas too that were really designed by Richard. And now it's gone back the other direction. And we've got lawsuits going all over the place right now. So Richard should be compensated for those out of the Haases that are sold. Great. You can license a patent. If you look at Microsoft, you know how Microsoft got started? They went to IBM and they said, hey, we've got an operating system called DOS, and we will license it to you, and every time you use it, you pay us a little bit of money. Worked out really good for Bill Gates. My challenge to Weaver is stop looking at this as you need to defend your patent and defend your rights. Start looking at this as an additional stream of income. Start looking at this as an opportunity, because by litigating this, what's happening is you are alienating the tree community, the very people that are paying the money that you're hoping to acquire. There's people like me out there that love to purchase a tool that makes tree access more convenient, easier, and products like this are going to do it. Weaver can either be a part of helping that or a part of stopping that. Right now you have a public relations issue that you need to fix. Right now your public relations message to the community is that you are stopping them from getting the tools they need to do their job. You need to flip that. You need to do some damage control. You need to make it so that Weaver is the company that supports innovation, supports getting tools in the hands of the people that can use them, and the people will reward you by handing over their money to let you do it. If you can do that, you can turn this around and you can make this a positive thing. So do I have any hate towards Michael Frankhauser? No. I think Michael should get paid for what he did. He made a great contribution. I think Richard should get paid for what he did by being able to sell his product. That's all I'm saying. All right, climb on, be safe. SAKA controversy.